One of the most fun things about running live sound is mixing the drums. So today I'm going to walk you through how I mix drums on the PreSonus StudioLive Series 3 console, which is a mouthful, but I'm just going to show you what I like to do, and then you can take little parts of it or the whole thing and copy it. Doesn't bother me. Or you can disregard it and roast me in the comments. That's cool too. But I'm just going to show you my workflow with getting good drum sounds. Now, if we haven't met before, my name is James and I help worship leaders, church sound techs, and tech directors eliminate the mystery and frustration around sound at church. So if that's you, go ahead and do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. A lot of you that are regular watchers are not subscribed. So do me a favor, it costs you nothing, it does a big benefit to me. Thanks for hitting that subscribe button. So today we're talking about mixing drums, and there's a few things I have to talk about before I show you some stuff. The first is that it starts with a great drum sound itself, like the actual drum resonating in space has to sound good. It has to be tuned, it has to be dampened, it has to be hit right by the drummer. There's nothing we can do back here that can fix that. The second thing that matters a whole lot is getting the mic placement just right. I did a video on that you can check out, and I'll put that in the link below, but oftentimes if I'm not getting the good drum sound that I want, or a sound that I can shape, it means I need to move a microphone. That's just it. Finally, we have to get our gain structure right, and today I'm using a recording, so I'm not going to show you the way that I set my preamp, but a good rule of thumb is to hit between where the green turns into yellow. If that's not enough for you, go to about -6 dBFS, and that should be enough. And you want to have a nice, healthy signal getting to your board so that you're using all the bits necessary at your disposal. Now, on my console, I am starting with clean console. You can see my EQ is not on, that's an unused channel, but I've got flat EQ. I've got some stuff panned. If a compressor is on, the threshold goes all the way up. So you'll be hearing what I'm hearing as we go, and hopefully we can get things really dialed in, and you'll see some of the decisions that I make along the way. Now, granted, again, it all depends on the way that the drum sound's getting to you. So we'll talk about that more with our EQ and compression modules. We'll get there in just a second. So let's just start mixing some drums. Before you start, or if you're getting a mix built in the first place, the way I start is I actually start with like the primary instrument and the lead vocal. I'm going to keep the vocals off for this one, but I need to relate the drums to something, right? So before I start mixing just the drums, I'll get them in the right place with the primary instrument, and usually the worship leader, and then the bass guitar. So the bass guitar should fill out the low end of the primary instrument. Now I have something to relate my kick drum to. So I'm going to push up my kick drum until that becomes the punch of the bass guitar, right? So kick drum is punch, bass is sustain. Now, I do have to take a second and remind you that you are listening on YouTube, but it sounds different when you've got a PA with subs. So you're going to have to just take my word for it on how it feels in here, and it might not translate over your cell phone, so don't roast me too bad for that, but try to glean from the experience. All right, now that that's there, I can add in my snare drum to match the kick. Right, if I've got too much snare and not enough kick, it feels off. If I've got too much kick and not enough snare, that feels off. So I'm trying to balance those so that they feel even as much as they can. I could add in the snare bottom at this point if I wanted to. I'm gonna keep that down for right now. Next, I add in my overheads. These don't have to crush you. Remember, we might get loud because it's live sound, so you can have them tucked back a little bit. If they are very loud, they will hurt somebody. Now, there are parts where we need to dial in the toms. And again, We get things right on the fader first before we start attacking with EQ. I call the fader the broadband EQ, or it's going to turn all the frequencies up and down, and we can fine tune it with our EQ after our fader is in the right spot. Sometimes you can crank your EQ up to plus 15 and you're like, I'm not getting enough. It's because your fader's down too far. So that's that one for you. Let me find a spot with the toms real quick so we can identify that section. All right, here's a section with the toms. Oops, that's the snare top bottom. All right, so the low tom is the hi-hat or the primary subdivision here. So those are feeling pretty balanced. Now, these are a little bit mismatched in level, right? So I'm having to push up the high tom a little bit more than the low tom. I might gain up the low tom or gain down the high tom a little bit, just so that visually those match, and I know that that's gonna be a good balance normally. After we have a good grasp on our balance, there's a couple more things we need to check. The first one is the polarity, or seeing if the drum mics when combined are making things thicker or thinner. When we have two different drum mics picking up the same sound source, sometimes the low frequencies can arrive and push and pull against each other. That's what we call a phase cancellation. We can try to see if we can fix that with a polarity reverse. That's this button right here. So the little circle with the line through it, that's our polarity reverse switch. So we can listen to the different drums and see, is it better or worse, or does the note kind of go down with the polarity reversed, or does it go up with the polarity reversed? In general, we want the lowest tone we can get out of that and then move on from there. So let's play around with some polarity switches and see if we can make things thicker or thinner with things in their relative balance. The first thing you might want to check is your snare top with the overheads. So we've just got the snare top and the overheads up, and I'm just going to hit the polarity reverse switch and see if it gets thinner or thicker. So with the studio monitor I'm hearing right now, I actually like it a little bit better with the snare top polarity reversed in relation to the overheads. Now the overheads, let's see if their polarity is not linked, right? So if we have the left and right channel where the polarity switch is on one and off on the other, when those get summed down to mono, the center part of that stereo image is going to actually cancel out. That could give us a very wide sounding overhead image, but it might mess up your broadcast if you're trying to get some sort of, mono center image from your overhead microphones. So for that reason, I chose to select the snare top to see if I wanted to reverse its polarity or not. Now, if I reverse the polarity on the snare top, I also need to check it on the snare bottom. Often, when you have two microphones pointing in opposite directions at the same sound source, that's going to cause their polarity to be reversed. With this recording, the polarity was reversed before it got to the board, but let's listen to what it would sound like with the snare top and snare bottom if the polarity was not reversed. So this has the snare top polarity reversed. The snare bottom polarity is not reversed. Let's see what happens when we flip the polarity here. So you could hear when we reversed the polarity on the snare bottom to match the polarity reverse on the snare top, right? So they're going together. You can hear how it got thicker. Now, I would not mix my snare bottom up this loud, right? So that's not where I would put that to craft my snare tone, but I want to let you hear that's what happens when the polarity is not reversed or if you need to hit that polarity switch with your snare bottom. Now it could make it brighter and you might want it to get brighter, but again, if I want that to happen, I'm gonna do that with EQ and compression after the fact. I want it to be right with the polarity switch beforehand. Now you could also do this with the toms and the overheads and the kick drum and the overheads, but we're gonna skip that one for today. Just wanted you to understand it so that you could know what to listen for. Okay, I'm pretty happy with the way that this static drum mix sounds now. Next, I'm gonna move on to my high pass filter. The high pass filter will get rid of the unwanted rumble that could clutter up the low end and make things cleaner by taking out low end. It might seem counterintuitive, but you'll see how things will tighten up when we add a little bit of high pass filter and get rid of the subharmonic content that we don't want. So I'm here on the input screen and you can see the high pass filter there. So that's at 45 Hertz. If I take that back out, it just feels a little bit better with it taking out those extra low frequencies. If I take it too high, it'll start to sound thin. And again, if you're listening through subwoofers, this will be much more apparent than probably the listening device you're listening on right now. So that's a little bit too thin. It still keeps the upper octave of the kick drum, but when I roll it back down, you'll hear how it gets a little bit beefier. Okay, yeah, that's where I'm really starting to feel it on this kick drum. Now with the snare drum, we'll repeat the same thing. We'll roll it up until the fundamental frequency goes away and then roll it back just a little bit. You can look at the graph and see where the bottom of the note is that it's picking up and kind of roll up your high pass filter to about there. See, we can see the fundamental frequency is right around, if I move our EQ band to there, it looks like that fundamental frequency is right around 150, 160. So let's take it up too high. Yeah, so we've lost that bottom end, we're gonna roll it back. Cool, so happy with that. Now with the snare bottom, we can actually roll up a lot of off the low end. I'll push up my fader so you can hear it a little bit more. And we could even make this thin so that it only adds maybe the top of the snare's sound. Maybe we don't want the body or the resonance of the drum, we just want the snares. This is also going to get rid of bleed from the kick drum that's right next to that microphone too. So it's a double win. Now let's listen to both of them together. That sounds good with both of them. Of course, I probably wouldn't like it by itself. That's really thin, but it's just meant to complement the snare top. Cool, let's go on to the toms. Okay, the low end started to go away. Roll it back. Sounds good. Now let's do the bottom tom. lost a little bit of impact there. Let's go back a little bit more. Cool. Now with the overheads, you can actually go really aggressive with the high pass filter and roll it all the way up so that you're essentially just getting cymbals out of your microphones. You're not getting the bottom end or any of the tone of the drums themselves. You might still get the smack of the stick on the drums, but you're not getting a lot of the extra stuff that you might not want. So in a situation where you're just kind of going for it, you don't have time to craft every moment of how the overheads sound. It might just be easier to just high pass filter way the heck up and go for it. So let's listen to what that sounds like. So that's pretty thin, but we're getting the cymbals. Well, you can hear how the snare drum went away in the overheads. Let's roll it back down. So you got kick and snare in there now, and I'm sure the toms would come through too. But when we take that out, you're just getting the cymbal, you're just getting the attack on the drums. So now with everything else, let's mix that in. Now let's roll it back down just to hear what it's like. Okay, so it's changed the texture of the low end of the toms, and you might like it a little bit more full, you might like it a little bit cleaner. It's up to you. This is where that polarity flip on the toms might really come through. You might really tell what's going on there. Or if you've got toms that are really mid-range and you don't want that mid-range coming through, or at least the overheads are picking up the mid-range of those toms and that snare, and you're not going for that sound, you can just filter it all out without having to mess with getting surgical on the EQ with your overhead mics. For this, I'm going to put the overhead high pass filter way up high, just for fun. Hey, thanks for watching the first part of this series on mixing drums with the PreSonus StudioLive Series 3 console. In future videos, we're going to go over EQ, compression, effects, and gating so that you can know all the tools that you have at your disposal on this great board. If you're watching this and you have a different console, let me know which console you have down in the comments below, and I'll see if I can borrow it from the good folks over at Zounds. We have a great partnership where I can borrow almost anything I want, and so if they've got it, I can try it out and hopefully I can make a video and show you. They also partner with me as an affiliate, which means if you buy something from them, I get a small commission and it helps support the channel without you having to do anything different. So check out the links in the description below and make sure that you comment which model of console you'd like me to show you next. As always, remember, it's all about the low end, avoid the sound tech solo, and nobody leaves church humming the kick drum. We'll see you back here next time on Outaway Audio.